Alrighty, welcome back, everybody. I don't know if you can tell, but I kind of rearranged my room a little bit. Now I'm locked in the corner. But today we're gonna be talking about the Batman, and just for starters, you just have to be prepared to sit through 3 hours of just amazing filmography. Though there's so much to talk about, and obviously this isn't gonna spoil anything. Any major plot points we're not gonna spoil, but we are gonna talk about certain characters. Yeah, first of all, I want to talk about that opening scene. There are very few movies where we introduce the characters nowadays in a way that this movie did. We know that the Batman is, he's a vigilante, he fights crime at night, but I don't think we've ever seen an introduction to a character the way that the Batman and Matt Reeves introduce Robert Pattinson's the Batman. He is terrifying. All the criminals are out. They look up. They see the bat signal, and they're terrified. And basically, you can be just chilling one day, and from the shadows, he's just gonna pop up and beat the crap out of you. And I thought that was insane. I was watching it. I was genuinely like, it was like, this is a horror film. Imagine being a criminal and you just have Batman pull up out of nowhere and beats the crap out of you, and he just beats the living crap out of one to start, and all the guys are just like, oh dang. But it's very few movies that are able to instill such fear, and fear is a big theme in this movie. The word fear is probably one of the most mentioned words in the entire movie. I started noticing towards the middle, it was just fear, fear, fear over and over and over and over again. And that's a major theme of this movie. And it's scary. I think if this movie would have been able to go for a rated R scene or rating, there would have been a few scenes that we would have definitely seen some R rated content. And I think that they knew exactly which scenes they wanted to make R rated, but since it became a PG, all they did was blur it out. But we see them still commit some of the atrocities, just blurred out. And I think if it would have been an R rated movie, and if we end up getting on a DVD release any sort of R rating, it's going to be brutal. So let's talk a little about the Riddler. The Riddler obviously is this guy who likes to plant riddles and have Batman like chase him like a little cat, have like a little cat and mouse type game with him, right? As the story progresses, we come to understand that it isn't just a simple uh, cat and mouse game. It's a lot more complex. There's a lot more elements. It isn't because he wants to have fun. It's because there's a reason to it, and there's a reason why he's committing these atrocities. All these people are connected, and towards the end, we find out what the connection is. But like I said, it's very complex. The script is extremely thought out. They knew exactly where they were going with every riddle, and as the story progresses, everything just kind of comes down to a close. And when they figure out what the riddle is, or the big riddle that they're trying to solve, everything makes sense. And towards the end, we're rewarded with some very emotional moments. After that, they have to fight and save the city, and Batman basically is by himself over here trying to stop the atrocities that the Riddler instills on the city. And that isn't even counting everybody else that's there. We have the Penguin, we have Falcone involved. It's just a big, complex, just chain of people that are involved. And that's what makes this movie so appealing to watch, because there's one character that has the most life in this movie, and that's the city of Gotham. The city of Gotham, we're introduced to it, and it's a shit show. Excuse my language. It's a dump. Everybody hates living there. Crime is just atrocious. You can't go anywhere without getting mugged or anything. Corruption is in on all levels, and we just see a city that's destroyed by the people. At the very beginning, we see the city who's just crying for help. It's desperate. It needs somebody to help them. And when we're introduced to the Batman, he has been fighting crime in the city for 2 years. And in those 2 years, he feels like he hasn't achieved anything. And that's why, as the story progresses, that's why a lot of people were bashing on Robert Pattinson's The Batman, but I think in this movie it fits perfectly because it's a man that in 2 years feels like he hasn't done anything. He's just broken. He's yes, the emo meme that is going around, it fits that Bruce Wayne because he just feels powerless. He feels like he hasn't done anything. And he has a right to feel down. He has a right to feel broken. And because he's been on this crusade by himself for the last 2 years. Obviously, he's had Gordon, and by the moment this movie starts, they have some sort of connect relationship, but there's still that mistrust. There's that idea that like we don't fully trust each other, but we have to work together to, to help this city. Gotham City is one of the major characters in this story, and I think it is the best character. It's not a tangible person, but the city has life through its people, through the characters that are interacting in the city. It becomes the biggest asset this movie has, because like I stated before, it's a dump. And by the end of the movie, we see a dump that has at least a little bit cleared out. It's still a dump, but by the end of the movie, we start seeing a little bit of what the Batman and company are able to do. Obviously, they can't stop crime. Crime will continue to exist. The people in power will always be greedy. Gotham is Gotham. But you will definitely see that the city of Gotham begins to develop as a character. It starts off just completely in shock. It needs support. It's literally like looking up to the heavens for some sort of aid. And by the end, it has a little bit of hope. It really brought me back to the Arkham games, because in the Arkham games, most of the stories takes place at night. It's you trying to find, just completing missions and etc etc. And that's what this movie feels like. It's Batman. He pulls up. The Riddler is making him solve a bunch of riddles. It's kind of like missions. He goes on this mission. He goes to the other mission. He goes on the other mission. But it's not boring at all. It's very intriguing because every riddle gets us to a different point, and it becomes an emotional roller coaster. The plot goes up, and then when you find out that this happens, it goes down, because obviously it has to do with somebody in particular, and then they're down, and then when they find out this, they go confront this person. This movie is so complex on so many different levels, and this complexity makes for a very intriguing story. Robert Pattinson, Batman, and Catwoman, they work well together. Even though they don't really know each other, they have the same goal. They want, even though she's using, her looks, her charms to get what she wants, at the end of the day, she still wants to make some change. Robert Pattinson, he isn't this charismatic Bruce Wayne that we're used to seeing, and that's reflected because there's a boy at the very beginning that he identifies with. He every time he sees him, he looks at him because he sees himself in him. The first thing that he always tells Alfred is, I want to make change, and my change isn't going to be through Bruce Wayne, it's going to be through the Batman. And because he doesn't want the little boy who became an orphan to turn out just like him. There's so much complexity in this movie that it's really hard to not say anything without spoiling the movie, because everything is connected, and the moment you talk about one, you're probably going to be able to piece it together as you start watching the movie. Unfortunately, the characters in this movie are very crucial. They all play their role. They're very significant to the story because everybody is important. It's not like in some movies where you feel like some of them are kind of pushed away more than others. No, in this one, everybody has a role. Everybody's important. It's like on a team. Everybody has their function, and everybody has to play accordingly. And in this movie, in order for the movie to shine the way that it does, everybody has to play their part. This movie really is a standalone movie. This movie isn't anything that connects. It isn't based on nostalgia like Spider-Man was. The reason why Spider-Man was so good was because of the nostalgia factor. This movie has no nostalgia. There's nothing. The only nostalgia you could feel is through the characters. It's not like they're bringing back the old Penguin from the 90s. It's not like they're bringing back the characters from Batman Forever. It's nothing like that. Those characters have their own movie, their own charm. This movie has its own grit because it's not charming at all. And it also doesn't have these one-liners that we're used to from comic book movies. This movie is hilarious. If you really understand what those jokes mean and how significant they are, they're extremely funny because they're not one-liners. These are very elaborated jokes, and if you're paying attention, then you're gonna understand what these jokes are. These were my overall impressions of the movie. If you haven't seen the movie, please go watch it. Just be prepared to spend 3 hours of your life in there. It'll fly by, but just be prepared to sit for 3 hours. But thank you so much for your time. Have a wonderful night, evening, noon, morning, wherever you are. And we'll catch you in the next video. Peace.